anything going on after, 4:30, 5 o'clock. So anyhow, we're going to hop right on in. Again, as Teresa said, make sure you guys do share the Minnesota user group off to on like Twitter, Facebook, whatever social media that you do have, because it does help our organization grow. And again, thank you to the sponsors that she did go ahead and list off. So today we're going to go ahead and start off with a brief introduction, just kind of give you a little bit of background about me, kind of what I do, and then we're going to start diving into use cases for your organization, the categories, and kind of really how taking all that information and how do you really make those end decisions for your organization. And then also we'll have a little demo, a few devices that I have here in front of me so that you guys can kind of see what is available for your organization. So starting off with the introduction, my name is Eric Marsi. I am from Barberton, Ohio. So if there's, I'm assuming that everybody here is from Minnesota, but this is a national type meeting where you can anybody can join in. So I'm not sure how far away I am from everybody else, but I am a little bit away from Minnesota. I am a unified communications engineer at T2M Works, so I do work alongside Richard Brennison. Some of you guys do know him. Different department within the organization, but him and I do work together on a few things. I recently graduated from the University of Akron with a bachelor's degree in Cisco networking, and I have audio codes and Microsoft certifications. Now, overall, to me, IT has been a lifelong passion and hobby for myself. Pretty much when I was 4 years old, built my first computer, 5 years old, wanted a server rack, and pretty much there onward, it's been just chaos. You can actually kind of see there's a server rack right here behind me too. So that passion stays on since I've been a little kid. But kind of outside of IT and technology in general, I love just general tinkering. If there's a limit, I try to get past that limit. Like building electronics, skiing, and four-wheeling, and just a few other things. But IT isn't everything, but it is a very major part of the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. So jumping into the content for today's presentation is that we're going to start off with defining use cases for your organization. Now, before we even want to look at devices, we really want to have a list of use cases of what our organization needs based on what type of worker that we are using. So again, that use case is the most important thing that we need to have first before we start investigating what devices are available to our organization. Additionally, you need to have a deep and clear understanding of how every user in your organization is doing their day-to-day job. If you've got, some information workers or knowledge-based workers, you need to really know, are they using dial-in, dial-in for a third-party voicemail? Are they, using a cell phone? Are they not really on net all the time? Are they, joining in? You have to really know what those users are doing in your organization. And another way to look at it is, your administrative users are going to be using Teams in a much different format versus somebody that may be in a call center type scenario. So they may not be using the meetings area or really even the collaboration as much. They're going to be primarily using more or less the phone portion, where administrative users are really using different areas of Teams. And you need to have devices around those that that best suit those employees based on what the requirements are. Now, another big one to kind of take into effect is, what is your current coexistence model? Now, for organizations that are in Teams today, you're in Teams only, cool. Anything that I'm about to show you will work with your environment. But if you're an organization that is still utilizing Skype for Business Server or Skype for Business Online, for example, there are different devices that may or may not work with your environment, but can be upgraded to something that supports Teams in the future. A great example of this is our existing Teams Room systems that you can use. They support both Skype and Teams meetings, where some Teams phones don't support a Skype use case. So you have to really know what your organization is currently utilizing to really start beginning to define those use cases and start choosing those devices. Now, once you have those use cases defined, you can then start investigating devices based on those use cases. Now, I could talk about these use cases, but what do one of these use cases look as an example? So here, we got just two different categories within an organization. We've got our knowledge workers, and then we also have our remote field users. So maybe you've got an organization, let's just use a gas company as an example. You've got a lot of people out in the field working on the pipeline and different scenarios that may not have a full desktop client, for example. They need to be able to use mobile apps. They may need to have access to analog type devices. There's a lot of things that they may need in those environments that you may not automatically realize up front, saying, oh yeah, we can just say here's a headset for everybody, or hey, here's a Teams phone for everybody. So kind of going through and listing all those requirements out for those individual users will greatly benefit you with determining what devices benefit your environment. So this is just a brief example of kind of what you want to be listing out, but it is one that is pretty much in depth that can benefit you if you're actually looking at devices today. So let's start looking at what the device categories are now that we have our use cases defined. So one of the first ones is wired headsets. So wired headsets are going to be on the much cheaper end of the spectrum when it comes to Teams certified devices. So the cheapest ones that I was able to find that are Teams certified start roughly around $38. And where we're going to talk about the Teams certification a lot, and primarily what the Teams certification means is that no matter what type of background noise or different scenarios, they're going to be providing a clear and rich experience for whoever is in that Microsoft Teams meetings. For example, if you join into a Teams meeting and you're using Apple AirPods, for example, that's the example everybody likes to use. You're going to run into a lot of scenarios where you're going to have that one employee that's just not going to sound right or potentially even causing an echo for your environment. And that can be problematic in a lot of scenarios, especially if you have a meeting with, let's just say, 250 people in it. That could be very hectic because you get that ringing, that echo going back to you. So that's kind of the big reason why you want to use a Teams certified device, because Microsoft has validated and ran vigorous tests against those devices to ensure that they meet their quality and their expectations and how they operate within your organization. So kind of going back to our wired headsets, the use case that I really see beneficial for wired headsets is in a shared environment where maybe you've got a call center where you've got multiple users that might be sharing a single desk. Not so much in the COVID world today, but if things get back to normal, kind of that's where you're going to be seeing where you have those shared headsets and you need multiple people using them, but they don't really need to leave the desk. The other great scenario for these is when you're in an environment where there's a lot of RF interference. I'm not sure if anybody here has ever been in a phone call and you've got somebody with a headset that maybe they're too far away from their desk or there's a lot of radio frequencies around them. You'll hear weird robotic sounds happening. In those environments, you do want to investigate wired headsets if you're looking for a headset use case. We'll kind of get into phones and other things here in a little bit. Now, when you look at manageability of these headsets, though, is there's not really going to be anything inside of Teams that says, oh, here, let's manage this device, let's push out updates for it. That's going to be relying on like third-party software, such as software from Jabra as a great example. So I put three different models of headsets that are in front of me, kind of from Microsoft's website. If you do want to learn about these devices, there is a website you can go to, and that is aka.ms/Teams devices. And that'll list out all the categories that you have, along with the way for you to go ahead and purchase these devices. So there are, with the wired devices, a mono on-ear and stereo variants. There's even some over-the-ear variants that can provide much richer audio quality and maybe a very loud environment, really depending on what your organization needs. Now, with the wired headsets, complementary to it is our wireless headsets. So these are for workers that may be up moving around. So they may be, let's say they have an office, they maybe want to walk around their office while they're on a phone call. I don't know about you guys, but I tend to do that a lot. Kind of just keeps you from falling asleep, maybe in those mind-numbing meetings that you always love running into, right? Now, with the wireless headsets, though, is that you run into scenarios where they can be cheaper, but they can also be very expensive. And it's really depending on what type of wireless headset that you are buying. So there are some different examples that I will show in the next slide, but we'll kind of come back to that pricing. Now, much like what we talked about the wired headsets, you do have that team certification for these headsets, so they are verified that they are going to provide a rich and clear call quality for everybody in that meeting. And the best idea that I've found for these is that it's great for mobile workers or maybe an office space that doesn't have too many people that are close together, where you're not going to run into that RF interference. The big thing with these is that they come in a lot of different varieties. So whereas wired headsets are primarily just single mono or stereo on or over the ear headsets, you have those same exact headsets with wireless, but you also run into scenarios where you could get earbuds. There's ones that actually go around your neck and then have little things that go up in earbuds. You've got single, just on ear, traditional Bluetooth headsets that you guys may have seen from Plantronics as an example. You will see those with the wireless headsets, not as much with those wired ones. Again, like our wireless headsets, our wired headsets, you are going to still rely on third-party management software to go ahead and manage these devices in your organization. So there is nothing native within Microsoft Teams. So as an example of the different devices that you have, this is just some of them, but you have some just plain Jane earbuds, the Evolve 65T from Jabra. So those are very similar to that of an AirPod, for example, where it's just two little pieces you put in your ear, and then it's a full-on team certified headset. But you have different ones that go around your neck. You've got decked headsets. You've got just standard wired and wireless ones as well. So really, when you look at these devices, there's going to be a lot of similarities between them in terms of features. But you want to be looking at kind of what does your organization need, what price point are you going to be looking at, and then making that decision and saying, okay, we want to try out these 3 devices as part of a pilot, and then from there go and decide what we want to actually use in our organization. Another big thing that you want to take into account is that when you start looking at these devices in general for your organization, you want to make sure that you're trying to stay within 1 or 2 vendors for a lot of these different things that you look at, because if you're having Yealink, you're having Polycom, you're having audio codes, you're having all these manufacturers in your environment, especially when you're talking with a third-party management software, you're going to run into scenarios where now you've got to have 3 different clients in your master OS image that you're deploying onto all these machines. There's a lot of complexities that come into that. So the big reason why a lot of these vendors have different categories of devices is so that you can stay with that one vendor or 2 vendors, depending on your scenario, and have and try to have every single use case in your organization covered. Now, our next category is very similar to both our wired and wireless headsets, and kind of taking both of those and combining into one and making it a lot louder, and that is our USB or wireless speakerphones. So these are great for users that are having shared communications on the go. So if you're a user that's traveling between sites, for example, and you're working maybe out of conference rooms that may or may not be enabled for Skype or some type of rich meeting experience, sorry, not Skype, Teams. You're going to want to have something with you that allows you to not have to wear a headset, but it can allow multiple people to join and join into that meeting content with a clear and rich audio experience. So that's where these USB speakerphone pucks, is what I like to call them, comes in. So these range in price between $80 and $250, so they can be very cheap, and they could also be very expensive, especially considering how many quantities of these that you are ordering for your organization. Now, big thing with these is that a lot of them actually are both wired and wireless. So some of them actually, the Jabra Speak 510 is an example that I'll use. It has both a Jabra Link 360 adapter, so you can connect it wirelessly and set it away from your laptop, but they also come with a USB cable. So if you're maybe in a high RF area, some of them have capabilities where you can just plug directly in to your laptop, or even if you have the cable for your mobile phone, to be able to utilize that functionality without having any of those RF interferences. Again, like our headsets, because these are very similar in categories, that you are going to be relying on that third-party management software for these devices. So moving away from kind of what our headsets and like our just plain Jane audio experiences are, we're going to start looking at that worker that has a desk phone today, whether you have a Skype phone and a Avaya phone, Cisco, whatever you have today, and kind of bringing them into a modern experience where they need native meeting join with inside of Teams. So that's where you're going to start investigating your native Microsoft Teams phones. So these are, different phones from various manufacturers that have the Teams application for Android running on top of them. And that allows for you to manage your contacts, your calendar, provide single touch join for meetings. So if you have like a 3-pip phone for Skype for Business, it provides that similar functionality, but inside of Teams. And we'll kind of touch base on the 3-pip devices further on. Also, that it provides a fully functional meeting experience for your users. So pretend you have a user, they have their computer, but maybe they're doing something else. They don't really want to utilize their computer for a meeting. You can join that meeting with the full video and everything on those Teams phones. Many of them have USB ports on them where you can plug a camera into them and utilize that for your meeting experience. Now, these devices is where it starts getting into the next manageability category, and that is where they are able to be managed right inside of the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. So inside the TAC, there will actually be a devices category, and then under there, there'll be IP phones listed. And from there, you can go ahead and push out updates and see different status information from those devices right in the Admin Center. Now, some manufacturers, as an example, Audio Codes, or even Crestron, for example, have third-party management software that you can use as well in addition to the Teams Admin Center. But know that every Teams certified device comes with the Teams Admin Center. It comes free with the Teams Admin Center as long as the user account for it is licensed. Those third-party vendor solutions usually come down more to the management of the devices, the actual physical hardware, more or less than just the Teams application itself. So with that, there are many, many, many form factors of phones, and there's also different, I like to call them generations. It's not really something that Microsoft puts out there as a generation, but I like to kind of break things into different generations. So when we first got our Teams phones, we had like the Yealink T58A, the Audio Code C450HD. Those phones were what I call dual firmware devices. So they had a firmware on them that allows them to be basic SIP phones. They allows them to be Skype for Business certified phones. And then with a flip of a switch, you can switch them into a native Teams phone. Now, the reason why I want to bring this up is that if you're an organization that's utilizing Skype for Business today and you're looking at getting new devices for your organization, but you don't have that move to Teams already in place, you would want to maybe consider those devices for those users that may or may not want to get a headset and want that traditional handset type functionality in their environment. So that allows you to make the investment, buy those devices today, utilize them in Skype mode, and then as you migrate to Teams, then you can switch them to Teams mode, and now you do not have to buy any type of new device. Now, some of the other devices that are out there in the market, the newer ones are Polycom CCX, your Audio Codes 470 HD, the Yealink VP59. A lot of these newer phones that are coming out do not support that dual firmware mode. So they are just Teams devices. So pretty much if you're in Skype today, you're buying these devices and they would be sitting on a shelf. So it is something to consider. Now, with these newer, I'm going to call them Generation 2. It's not an official term, but Generation 2 devices. You are going to run into scenarios where they do perform a lot better versus the Generation 1 phones. So as an example, my Yealink T58A that I have next to me, it is a very slow experience compared to that of like a brand new Crestron 8-inch Teams phone. Because, as technology progresses, processors at the price point of these phones get a lot better. And so you will see those different characteristics. That's not really thrown out there by too many people, but I at least want to make you aware of what your experience will be with those phones if you do purchase one of those older devices. Now, one of the things I mentioned was 3-pip devices, and that is what you may see traditionally today with your existing Skype for Business infrastructure, if you have that. And that is your Polycom VVX, your Audio Codes, C450 HD, 448, etc. There's a lot of phones in this category. Now, these phones today work with Microsoft Teams, but they're in a 3-pip interoperability mode. So what that means is that these phones, when they sign in, they're actually signing into Skype for Business Online, and then Microsoft has interop services on their side that allow those to communicate with those of Microsoft Teams. So right now, Microsoft has put the date as July 31st, 2023. But with COVID and all the other restrictions that have popped up, Microsoft did kind of say, we're going to probably extend it past this date, but we don't have a definite date of when this will be eventually turned off for your organization. So if you are on Skype today and you have these phones, you are able to move to Teams and still utilize them, but in a limited functionality standpoint. So what are those limitations? So one big one is you will not get any type of voicemail message waiting indicators. So, traditionally, if you got a message, you would see, hey, you have a voicemail, and there'd be a little red light on the phone. You do not have that with these phones. If you try to change your presence, that does not work. There's a lot of things, and you can see those listed out below, that do not work primarily with these phones. Now, one at the bottom is the local media optimization feature of Microsoft Teams. So if you're in a complex enterprise voice scenario where you have a large organization and you're wanting to have some type of media bypass to reach another PSTN provider or like a media pack internally where you're not going out to the team service and coming back in, you're going to want to look away from utilizing these phones for those scenarios because they do not support any type of fancy Teams feature that allows you to keep that media on net where, with Teams phones, they support that functionality. So there are a lot of different things that kind of come up where you're running into like, I don't know if this will work for my organization. But from a basic functionality standpoint of just being able to quickly join a meeting just for audio, for making basic phone calls, these phones will still work for you today in your organization. Now, different organizations have trade-up programs. So if you do have a VVX or one of these legacy devices in your environment today, you can trade those up and get a team certified phone as a replacement for those. So make sure you do kind of check out those different vendors. Now, the doom and gloom date of July 31st, 2023 is not really going to be one of those things where it's all doom and gloom. Yeah, these phones are just going to be completely dead. I didn't actually create a slide on this, but Microsoft is going to be releasing a feature later this year that allows you to take these devices, switch them to like a generic SIP mode. So if you're registering to like a SBC or to a third-party PBX, such as like free PBX is a great example. You can switch it to those modes, and Microsoft will soon allow you to register those devices directly to the Microsoft Teams service. So it will have even less functionality. So we're kind of going backwards in a way. Even less functionality than what you have right now with 3PIP. But if you still have those phones past the date, you'll still be able to at least make phone calls with them, but you're not going to have that rich native experience that you will with Microsoft Teams phones. Similar to that of our native Teams phones, we do have another type of endpoint, and that is our Teams display. The way I like describing Teams displays is that they are literally Teams phones without a handset. There are Teams phones without a handset that are just still Teams phones, but Teams displays I like to think of as native independent devices that somebody's going to want to put in like an executive office where a CEO maybe have like a side table and they want to be able to still join the meetings, that have built-in camera and high quality audio for a very small single user type environment. Now, these are designed to be standalone, as I mentioned, but they also do support Better Together over Bluetooth. Now, what is Better Together over Bluetooth? What that means is that if you lock your computer, this device will lock. If you unlock your computer, that device will unlock. And it's complementary to your Teams experience that you have on your desktop where you can say, okay, I'm going to join a meeting on my computer. Oh, crap, my camera's not working or something of that matter. On that device, you'll see a little banner across the top that you can press join meeting, and immediately it will pull your computer out of the meeting and join you right into that meeting on your Teams display. With that, Microsoft also provided a lot more functionality versus a Teams phone. So you actually have integration to check data in your OneDrive, so you can actually see the files in OneDrive. There's a lot more it's a lot faster processor, so they're able to add a lot more to those versus that of a Teams phone. Now, the cool thing is that it's still the same underlying app that's running on this that differentiates between, hey, it's a Teams phone or, hey, it's a Teams display. So the code base and everything is very similar, but they added a lot more features that you would not have on a Teams phone, such as the custom backgrounds or the custom home screen that you are seeing in front of me right now. Again, these devices have built-in cameras. They have Cortana voice support. So you can say, hey, Cortana, schedule a meeting for tomorrow with whatever, and she will schedule that meeting for you. And then again, file management like we discussed originally. Now, before I jump into like kind of the next area where we're moving away from just standard end users and we're moving to more of conference room type solutions. Does anybody here have any questions? I'll also give a quick water break. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions. If they do pop up, I'll have Teresa just kind of interrupt me and say, hey, there's a question there. So after we've kind of examined all the things that we have available for our end users, we can then go ahead and look at different conference room solutions that are available with Microsoft Teams, as I'm skipping ahead too much. There we go. So we have kind of 4 different categories, but not really 4 separate categories. Things can be very complementary to one another. So the first one is our Microsoft Teams rooms for Windows. So these are our original Teams room system that we have had since day one with Microsoft Teams. Now these are really designed for your medium to small, medium to large conference rooms. So if you have an executive board office, a conference room, very large, where a lot of users are coming in, that is going to be what you're wanting to look at for a conference room solution for those type of scenarios. Now with these, they support things such as one-touch meeting join, like a lot of other Teams devices. But one big key differentiator is that they support, that's not fully there yet, but they're working on it, is they're bringing Zoom and WebEx meeting support to these devices. So if you're an organization, you're talking with outside parties, they have WebEx, this other company has Zoom, you don't have to have another laptop brought in there with this HDMI ingest trying to join those meetings. Now you can actually join natively and utilize the camera on those room systems for those meetings. So really cool stuff to be seeing with the Teams rooms for Windows. Now, a new device category originally came to us as collaboration bars, and that is our Teams rooms for Android. So these are really designed for your small to medium conference rooms, like huddle rooms, and they only support a single display. They were originally going to add dual display support, but I haven't seen anything around that in quite some time. So right now it is just a single display. Now, one of the key differentiators with this is that they also were originally designed so that you could have just a single display, no exterior meeting control panel, and just have a touchscreen display that you could just tap on the screen, join meeting, and not have to worry about anything else. With this, Microsoft has made it so that you can now have Teams remotes. So you don't have to have a touchscreen display. You can still utilize these. So it really is going to come down to once we start investigating those a little bit further. Now, in addition, the Surface Hub, they just recently released the 85-inch variant of the Surface Hub 2S, but we've had the Surface Hub 2, I think it's like 55 or 50-inch, I'm not sure on the exact number, but smaller than the 85-inch for quite some time. And those can be the meeting room experience. So that could be the only device you have in this conference room, but you can also make it supplementary to the Teams rooms for Windows or Teams rooms for Android. So you could join your meeting experience on those Teams room systems, but then utilize a Surface Hub for your whiteboard functionality and different things that we'll kind of get into here shortly. And the last one is a very new category, is a Teams panel. So Teams panels, and I actually have one here next to me. These are designed to be mounted outside of a meeting room so that somebody walking by a meeting room can see when they have upcoming meetings in that room, or be able to schedule, hey, I need this next hour or something in this room, let's book it and mark it so that I have this room available to me. It looks like we do have a question that did pop up. So for the individual users who just want the simplest experience possible to fuse devices to learn, what do you recommend? So for for individual users that it's just going to be a single user, I'm going to have to say the Teams displays. Primarily, it's an all-in-one device. You don't have any cables. It's just a plug-in Ethernet or plug-in power and connect to Wi-Fi type scenario where you pretty much have no other setup other than this small little device that sits on a user's desk. If they need something bigger, you are going to want to look at Teams rooms for Android, where you can do a display with a bar across the top of the camera, and that'll provide a larger display and a larger experience for your organization. But we'll add a little bit of complexity to your deployments. And then we also thought everyone gets a laptop and a mobile phone. Since you both allow access to the Teams app, utilize a cell phone, is that a good idea? So primarily, if you're utilizing Teams, I would have Teams sign on that mobile phone and on whatever devices they have. So no matter what scenario, what situation they're in, they can join in. I'm sure, hopefully that's the correct way to answer that question for you. So I'm going to dive into each one of these 4 categories a little bit further so that you guys can differentiate more than just a general overview of these 4 scenarios. So the first one is our Teams Rooms for Windows, and that is what you're going to see in a lot of promotional branding from Microsoft as kind of the forefront. It is kind of the top of the line when it comes to a conference room solution. So these support for a lot of great branding and customization. This is actually a picture of a Teams room system that I actually used to have. I don't have anymore. But I was able to set a custom background. You can brand that to your environment, so you can see you have your company logo on one side, the time on another, and just a cool way to personalize your investment in these devices. With these, they also support HDMI screen input. So, if you walk into a conference room, maybe you have some type of device that doesn't have a screen, or just something you want to ingest directly into that meeting without actually joining into that meeting. You can plug an HDMI cable into it. You can bring it into that meeting, not just for everybody in that room, but for everybody in that Microsoft Teams meeting. So really cool to see that type of HDMI ingest into the environment. Now, with that, Microsoft also has a really cool feature called Content Camera. And that is where you can take a traditional whiteboard. So, your run-of-the-mill whiteboard with, your good old dry erase. I can't remember my bad. The dry ink erase pens or whatever. And you can pretty much go ahead and actually draw on that. And as you're drawing that content, the content camera, which is traditionally just like a Logitech Brio or a different web camera, will go ahead and capture that and save those notes as if you're writing on a very expensive touchscreen, for example. So that was really cool to see that support native to these devices. Again, we can also connect to other services such as Zoom and WebEx. Not natively, but through their web application, you can join those meetings from the Teams Rooms for Windows. Now, with these, they also support multiple external cameras. So for large boardrooms, as an example, you may have 2 cameras that just to cover the entire scope of this entire room. You can actually switch between those, and depending on what solution you have from what vendor, they may be able to automatically switch between those, and that is supported in this type of scenario. And with that, I'm not sure if Microsoft still has the streaming limitation put in place that they put in last March, where they limited everything to 720p. But if they don't have that in place right now, they do support 1080p video streaming from the Teams Rooms for Windows. So you will get, a very rich meeting experience for any type of video content being shared. And then also the management for this is not using something like Android as an example. You're actually using Windows as the underlying OS for this. So pretty much Windows updates, all those type of things are handled automatically. So the device is actually rebooted about 2:30 every morning, depending on your time zone, that may be different. But the underlying Windows OS is completely managed by Microsoft. So you can join to the domain if you want, but pretty much the best way that everybody deploys these is that they don't join them. They just treat them like, as like a IoT device where you're not really joining it to a local domain, as an example. So really the Teams Rooms for Windows are kind of your top of the line scenario for your conference rooms. And as an example of a deployment of one of these, this is a picture that Microsoft provides. You can see you have an external room console that can be put around different areas of the room, where you can go ahead and just tap a button and you can join into the meeting. And then around the desk, there's actually microphones. So depending on your speaker solution that you have from whatever vendor, you can have multiple microphones for, so that no matter where somebody's at in that room, their voice is being heard and being put into that Microsoft Teams meeting. In the front of the room, you'll also see that you have a content camera in the center, and then you have your display split between 2 different displays. You can support one display, 85 inch as an example, or you could do something like 2 65 inches and have both of those displays working. Depending on what configuration you do, will also change the layout of the meeting in those type of environments. Now, Teams Rooms for Android are very much similar to that of a Teams Rooms for Windows, but the primary difference is that they are really designed for those smaller environments where you don't want to have, running cables for cameras, having to have your wiring company in, having to get everything wired up, but you just want a simple turnkey solution you could pop in a room and now they've got a meeting experience. And that is really where the Teams Rooms for Android come into place. So they are a much lower cost and they're more of an integrated type device. So if you actually look in this picture here, you can actually see that, this is a Logitech, for example, down here, that you have a collaboration bar, which is the processing, the computer itself that's running Android that your display plugs into. So that allows you just to simply put that beneath your screen, plug an HDMI in, plug it in power, you're up and running. Now, some of them, depending on the vendor, will either have support for a large touchscreen in the center, or like in this case with the Logitech, you'll have a remote meeting panel you can use to do one-touch meeting join and so forth. Now, with this, they also only do 720p video. So, given, that of where Teams is still potentially still limiting to 720p, you're not really going to notice that difference. But it is also only going to support that single camera that comes with that collaboration bar. So you're not going to be able to do large areas with multiple cameras. So do keep that one in mind, or even an external camera in general. You're using that camera that comes with that, and that's all you're going to get. There's also no support for the whiteboard, the content capture. There's just a lot of things that you'll be missing out on, but may or may not be needed in a small room environment. Now, you can also still utilize a Teams Rooms for Windows in a small room environment, but just know that there is going to be a larger amount of cost as compared to a Teams Rooms for Android or something else for that room. One of the other devices that we did talk about, and I didn't even want to put in the bullet points, I just wanted to show you this device, is the Surface Hub. So these devices are not even really just dedicated to Teams like everything else. They are more or less independent devices that you can have throughout your organization, whether they're permanently affixed to a wall, or you can have them, in this case, shown below, on mobile carts. So these allow you to join the Teams meetings, have a full 55-inch or 85-inch interactive whiteboard in the way, where you've got pens and you can do a lot of different things with these. Now, in addition to the Teams side of things, you can also go ahead and install Windows Store applications, have a full-featured web browser, and kind of just have pretty much a full computer in the front of your room. So where you may need like more than just a way to share content to a room, you may need something like a CAD viewer software or something running on top of it. If that is supported, you can actually install that on these devices and be able to bring that information up native right in that room. So it's not really a Teams device, but it does have the ability to join Teams meetings and provide a way to either be the meeting room device or be complementary to your Teams Rooms for Windows or Teams Rooms for Android investment that you have. So there are some different scenarios that those do run into, but don't want to dive too much into it since they aren't really Teams devices, but it is an option that you do have for your environment. One of the other things that we did talk about is our Teams panels. So these are a fairly new device category that Microsoft released, and these are traditional to that of room scheduling panels that you may or may not have seen with like a Skype for Business environment from Crestron as an example. So these allow you to really locate valid conference rooms. So, depending on an organization, you may have different rooms around, but are those really conference rooms? The way that you could really tell is by having these outside the room. So, hey, this is a conference room that I can use for my, my team or my, just for a quiet place to go work. So with the room system, with the Teams panels, is that you can still reserve that room via the Teams mobile app or via Outlook or your traditional ways, and that will still show up there on that panel. But if you want to go to that Teams panel and let's say, hey, the room's not available right now, let's schedule a meeting here in an hour. You can go on there, hit the reserve button, and schedule that meeting. Now, with that, that is not going to add a meeting participant to that. That's not going to be able to give you a solution where you can say, hey, I want to add, Satya Nadella to this meeting. It will not let you do that from that Teams panel in its current state. And really, these panels in today, to me personally, are more or less just a standard screen that's showing the calendar for these rooms. Because if you actually look in that top image, if there's an active meeting going on, I have no way of actually scheduling a meeting in this. And this is some feedback that I have provided to Microsoft, because if I want to really use this conference room and there's an available spot further on, I can't do anything. As an example, I have one sitting here right next to me. I want to go ahead and schedule something later. I can't do anything because it thinks that there's somebody in this meeting room speaking right now at the Minnesota user group. So there's really nothing else that I can do from these other than see the room presence and what's going on if there's an active meeting going on. Now, if there wasn't a meeting going on, I would be able to, do that, as I said, but it is still to this day very limited, and I believe that's just because it is so new. So right now, in its current state, you're not going to get a lot of the features that Microsoft showed off, but they may be bringing those here in the future. I guess the only way to find out is if time will tell. There's also a few little bugs. The calendar on the right side is only limited to the central time zone. So for everybody in Minnesota, great, you're good to go. But if you're in Eastern time zone like myself, you will run into scenarios where the time on the left does not match the scheduled times on the right. And this is just kind of some of the things with this device being so new and so brand new to the market. I want to at least make everybody aware. I'm not going to just sit here and try to sell, oh yeah, everything's great, there's not an issue. I want to make everybody aware, so you're not going to get this device and say, oh man, Eric made this recommendation. I don't want. Why would I want to buy this from an organization? So just keep that in mind if you do. Excuse me. If you are interested in actually purchasing these for organization. So right now from Crestron, there are some 7 and 10-inch models, and Yealink is coming to the market in the future. Personally, I know Crestron is a lot more expensive than a lot of other organizations. I personally like the Crestron panel from my own experience. Even playing with it, even it's in limited format, the hardware they come with, very useful and easy to mount. I'll actually be mounting on the wall behind me here shortly. So yeah. Now, so the question I was asked was that, so the Teams panel does not integrate with Outlook. So it does integrate with Outlook. So it'll allow you to still create a meeting if the room is available. And it will add it to that room resource account calendar after you schedule that meeting, but you cannot, from the panel, add a participant or add anything like you could with an Outlook or a full-fledged Teams client and its current state. So it is showing the Outlook calendar. So this is showing right now, mine's not really in a room account, it's just showing my own personal calendar. But you will run into those scenarios in your environment. So does anybody have any questions about Teams panels or anything of that matter? Okay, I'm going to kind of continue on here. So our next small little category that Microsoft really recently just announced, along with the Teams panels, is Team certified monitors. And this is kind of one that's had me a little bit scratching my head, like, I don't know why we've got these. But they're really designed for workers having meetings at their desk or in their office a lot that don't want to have a supplementary device. They want to utilize their full Windows 10 experience. So they have built-in cameras, built-in microphones, speaker bar on the bottom of the displays. And currently there are 3 models on the market, with the 4th one coming here soon, that kind of bring all that functionality to your Teams client. Again, it's a very fancy display that is Teams certified, but to me, I honestly think that they are charging a little bit too much for them. Like a 24-inch full HD, not even 1440p, just full 1080p. They're wanting $520 for them, and to me, it's seeming like it's something that's a very niche market that I don't see a lot of people buying. But it's still something that may be useful for an organization given the right use case. And those did launch back here in February. So with that, we have kind of really examined all the device categories that we have available to us. But we really need to now think about, how do we decide what we want for our organization? So the big thing that we need to start with is that we need to examine the use cases that we defined earlier. And based on knowing what you know today about those Teams devices, determine what you need for your organization and start saying, okay, we need to get some trial equipment from our provider. So CDW, Unified Communications as an example, they a lot of times will provide your organization with demo equipment that you can use to see what those devices have in a hands-on format. And then from there, you can then narrow those lists down. So you can say, okay, we're going to go with X, Y, and Z devices. And then you can have a device roadshow in your organization, for example. Maybe not so much with COVID, but once these restrictions and everything are lifted, you can have a device roadshow where you can talk about, hey, we're looking at these devices for organization, come here, get your hands-on experience with them, find out what will benefit you the most for your role, and then we can utilize those and provide those to you now that we have a list of, these people want these headsets, these people want a Teams phone, and you have that full list, and that experience is now provided to your organization. Again, you want to stay within as very few vendors as you can. I'm not saying go with everything with one vendor because that's not always the best scenario, but especially when you're dealing with third-party management solutions for certain things, you want to kind of limit how many different third-party manufacturers you have between warranty processes, between manageability and users' machines. Those really do stick out in your organization. So I did have a demo scheduled, but most I can do really is show a Teams panel, which I kind of did during our presentation. I do have a Teams phone in front of me, but not really much I'm going to be able to show too much there. So with that, I do want to go ahead and kind of wrap things up and give a big shout out to our sponsors, Microsoft, RBA, Concurrency, Now Micro, Cyber Advisors, PEXIP, Sky North Software, and EPOS. Without them, today would not have been possible. But also with that, I want to bring forth a Q&A just in case anybody has some scenarios that they're looking at, and just make an open panel discussion for things that you guys are looking at in your environment if you do have those questions. So I'll kind of give anybody the floor. If you guys want to hop on microphone, have a chat, go right for it. Sure.
What do you see as the biggest barrier when you're thinking about selecting equipment? I mean, there's so much out there.
Yep. So I think two of the biggest barriers are really going to come down to the organization understanding, do we really need to spend money on this type of stuff? And the big thing is that, yes, you do want to spend money on this. You don't want to just utilize something that you have built in front of you. But the other big hurdle is really going to come down to cost. In today's day and age, organizations, especially if you come around like conference room solutions, we're really not in person as much as we were anymore. And some companies may look at the price of a conferencing system and say, we don't really want to do this. Now with Teams rooms for Windows and Android, they are still a lot cheaper than what we had if you go back to the Link days, where you had the smart tech Link room systems, where you had these giant panels in the front of your room, or even like from Polycom, where you're talking $10,000 to $20,000. We're still in a lot cheaper price bracket, but we're still talking a very significant amount of money when you're looking at multiple conference rooms. So if your organization has 25 conference rooms, you take 25 times 30, $3,000-$4,000. That adds up pretty quick. So with that, you do run into scenarios where organizations may be tight on money, which is traditionally the biggest roadblocker when it comes to choosing different Teams devices for your organization.
What other questions do people have? I mean, this is a great opportunity for us to kind of pick Eric's brain. Are you seeing more organizations moving to Teams calling like this?
So with the Teams devices, if you are looking at Teams calling, pretty much any project that I'm working on, at least, we are looking to go ahead and actually make sure that they are getting Teams devices as part of that project. We don't want to say, let's move to Teams calling, everything's great, and push you to Teams, and now you've got horrible call experience with whoever's on the other end, like especially if you're using like PSTN calling with Teams, whether it's direct routing or anything else. You will run into scenarios where, if you're not utilizing those Teams devices, that you are going to run this, the device can disconnect, you're going to run audio issues, and you don't want to really be moving a customer to that environment and saying, okay, here's these cool features, and now their experience sucks, and now they're like, okay, well, our old system didn't do that, but this system does. So with those projects, we really want to make sure that the Teams devices are included there as like a line item in a way.
So Ben put a question here. What about classroom use? Teacher, remote students?
So if a teacher is actually in a classroom, and it's going to come down to really how they're utilizing this classroom. If I go back to like when I was in high school or whatever, we had pretty much dry erase boards. We didn't really have, touch screens in every room or anything that matter. If the teachers are able to get a form of a touchscreen in the room and you're wanting to keep it economical, I would really look at utilizing a Teams Rooms for Windows if they're wanting to have both the teacher on display, but also have Microsoft Whiteboard support where you can capture those dry erase notes if they're kind of bringing that forth. Now, if the teacher's not really doing a live lesson and they're standing in front of a virtual class or anything, you would just want to utilize, their standard computer with a team certified webcam and either a headset or some type of audio solution for their standard computer. So really it's gonna come down to what your use case is in those classrooms. But like I said, with the Teams Rooms for Windows, you can have a really great experience for anybody in or out of that classroom, so that no matter whether they're, if you have like a hybrid class where you have half the students in class and half the students out of class, no matter where they're at, they can have those notes available to them and see everything just like they were in that classroom.
Thank you. We've got another question from Chris. With more companies using more than one conference platform, i.e. Zoom and Teams, do you have any recommendation on conferencing room device selection for this scenario?
So if you're utilizing multiple scenarios, you are for sure going to want to look at the Teams Rooms for Windows. So those are going to be able to provide not a native, but a meeting join experience that allows you to utilize that room system to join in with webcam support to those Zoom or WebEx meetings. And that's kind of the big thing that I like to mention for those Teams Rooms for Windows, because no matter whether your external organizations, you're not dialing into those conference bridges, and just hearing audio and not actually having a interactive meeting experience anymore. You're now joining into those meetings and having that functionality. I'm not sure about the release dates on everything yet. They may actually be already out. I believe they're out with the Zoom stuff already in preview, if I'm not mistaken. But they are bringing that to the table, and that is one big thing for the Teams Rooms for Windows. And it looks like we also have a question from Josh.
Yeah, I see that.
Yep. So he says that we recently remodeled our larger meeting rooms approximately 5 years ago and used Crestron products predominantly. Happen to know if there's any future support for integration of these really expensive overhauls. So that's going to come down to what you're actually utilizing from Crestron. So if you're utilizing the full Crestron meeting room experience where you've got a lot of stuff under the table, and you've got not really like a Skype room system in a way, but you've got where you have the little Crestron panel, those are not going to be supported to natively join into Microsoft Teams. If you have the Crestron panels outside the room, again, you're going to run into scenarios where if you're utilizing, I can't remember the Crestron server name. If you're utilizing that to update the Outlook calendar, you can still traditionally use those like room panels with Teams, but it's not going to create a Teams meeting. It's still just going to update the calendar of that meeting room. But for the internal meeting room join experience, if you're utilizing one of those older systems, you will have to upgrade that to get a native Teams room type functionality in your environment.
Thank you. What other questions do you guys have? I mean, what do you see as the biggest issue or conflict as it relates to the Zoom and Teams?
I think the biggest conflict is that if you're looking at from a conferencing standpoint, from like a meeting room in a way, the big thing is that you're going to run into scenarios where people, now they got to bring their laptop and they got to have all this extra stuff just to join a Zoom meeting. Where with the Teams for Windows, you wouldn't have that issue. Now, if you look at it from an end user perspective, and not just a conference room perspective, you're going to run into scenarios where users are confused sometimes with multiple clients, because now you've got a client for internal meetings, you've got a client that you're using with XYZ customer, using this client for this customer, and really your users be able to fully understand how to use those features of those different clients is really going to come into play, where you're going to maybe have, hey, how do I turn my webcam on? Or hey, how do I change my audio device in a Zoom meeting? Whereas in Teams, I just press these three little dots and I have my device settings there in front of me. So those are kind of some of the biggest hurdles that I run into I see people run into with multiple clients and multiple platforms. It looks like Ben shared a link to Microsoft. And I think he's talking about the third-party meetings that you can how to actually utilize it on Teams Room for Windows. So yeah, Liz actually looked like they brought Cisco WebEx and Zoom both to public, so that is really cool. The more you know. So thanks again for that one, Ben.
One comment real quick on was it Jason's with the laptop and the mobile phone. We went through a process at a company I was working at of figuring out what kind of devices, and we found that if you get a headset for people who have laptops, the meeting experience is going to be so much better because the microphones on headsets are way better than the laptops.
Correct.
So you want to make sure that it's a third or a team certified device, and you're going to have a much better experience in the meeting with a lot less echo and background noise as well.
Correct.
Thank you, Ben.
And if you do a Bluetooth one, you can pair it to both the phone and the laptop and do an easy transfer from a meeting from being on your laptop to your mobile device as well, if you need to move.
One thing I want to add to that, Ben, is that a great way, if you're kind of wondering, hey, is my device team certified? A great way to really find out is that not every device from Skype for Business was fully brought over as a team certified device, but a very vast majority of them were brought over. But a big differentiator that compared to just a standard Bluetooth headset versus like a certified headset is that they have a USB dongle for them. And that is due to the needs for the call control and ensuring that you're not just utilizing built-in Bluetooth, which may run into connectivity issues. So when Microsoft brought that certification forward for those wireless devices, they wanted to make sure that the wireless connectivity was never, being affected based on what computer or device that you are using. Now, if you're using a mobile phone with a team certified device, that is still going to be Bluetooth.
Good information.
That is a great point, because we did run into that with Bluetooth connectivity to the computer where it gets choppy and everything. So if you do have that dongle, it makes a huge difference.
And it's easy also, instead of having to go into Bluetooth and manually pair a headset and pop into pairing mode, you're able just to go simply and unplug a dongle, plug in another computer. Now you're paired to that computer, done. And a lot of times Windows will also change the default audio device to that new device as you plug it in too. So you're not really messing around, changing things around. You're just, as soon as you plug it in, you're good to go.
And I know with Poly at least, and possibly Jabra, if you reach out to them and ask for some demo units, they'll send you some that you can play with.
Yep.
So everybody, I don't know if we've got any other questions. What I will do is a couple shameless plugs because it's inherent in my nature. Please don't forget about filling out the survey. We are giving away that Surface Go 2, and you do need to fill out the survey in order to be able to win it. Next, I'd like to announce who the winner is for the $25 gift card for this particular session. It is Kelly Jacobson. Kelly, you'll be receiving a note from us regarding the $25 gift card.
Awesome. Congratulations, Kelly.
So I hope that you fill out the survey. It's important for us to understand if this was in fact valuable to you. I hope it was. I know I feel like I've drank from the fire hose today.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And if you guys do have any questions, my Twitter, my LinkedIn, my message, it's always open. So if you guys do run into some areas you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Also on my website, ucit.blog, and I post a lot of things regarding teams there. So if you guys do have any questions, feel free to let me know, okay?
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. It looks like it's going to be a nice weekend if you're in Minneapolis. If you're like me, I'm going to get the motorcycle out. So on that note, thank you very much and have a great day.